All hearts and minds clear. Baruch Hashem Yahweh. Blessed be the name of Yahweh. Told about, O great King, for another Shabbat day. Told about for keeping us alive. Told about for all the things that you've done for me. Told about for all the things that you've done for us. And I ask that on this day that you may please forgive us for all the wrong that we have done. And I ask that we may be acceptable unto you. I ask that you may please give us a clear mind, a clear heart, and ask that we may all direct our hearts unto you on this Shabbat day. For you have commanded us to keep it set apart. And ask that we may keep it set apart to the best of our ability. Please remember those who are sick in the hospital, or those who may be at home recovering from surgery, or those who may have been injured. Please remember those who are battling with any sickness, any cancer, any chronic pain. But I've asked it on this day that you may give them rest. Please remember those who have been traumatized. Please remember those who have been hurt. Please remember those who may be depressed. Please remember those who may be frustrated with anything. But I've asked that you may give them rest also on this Shabbat day. And I've asked that we would not just be hearers of your word, but ask that we would be doers also. Ask that none of us will deceive ourselves. Please remember those who are in need of anything. Please remember those who are in need of love, those who are in need of strength, those who are in need of protection, those who are in need of guidance. I've asked that all the needs of your people will be met in due season. For you are a shepherd and we shall not lack. I've asked that we all may have a wise heart and see you as our help. For you are a help in a time of trouble. And I ask that whenever we find ourselves in the midst of great darkness or even thick darkness, that we may trust in your word and we may see you for who you are. The righteous Elohim, the Elohim of great power, the Elohim of great mercy, the Elohim of great patience. I ask that we will believe that you are who you say you are. And I ask that none of those who wait on you will be confounded. And I ask that none of those who put their trust in you will be ashamed. I proclaim these words in your name and also your son's name. Bahashem Yahweh, Bahashem Yahusha, in the name of Yahweh, in the name of Yahusha. Amen, amen, so be it.
Hallelujah, hallelujah. Shabbat Shalom, Mr. Pekah, Moreh is still setting up. We'll take a couple of praise reports. Anybody any praise reports or songs on their heart, the floor is open. Okay, we're going to take the two, Kuta Zaria, then we Mikael, then we turn the floor to Moreh.
Go first, Brandon. Shabbat Shalom, Mishpachah. Want to give all praise. Let me see to the Father. Bradley wants to say, sing a song.
When the spirit of Yahweh comes upon my heart, I will dance like David danced. When the spirit of Yahweh comes upon my heart, I will dance like David danced. I will dance, I will dance, I will dance like David danced. I will dance, I will dance, I will dance like David danced. When the spirit of Yahweh comes upon my heart, I will dance like David danced. When the spirit of Yahweh comes upon my heart, I will dance like David danced. I will dance, I will dance, I will dance like David danced. I will dance, I will dance, I will dance like David danced.
Hallelujah. All praise to the Most High, Yah. What about?
Hallelujah, hallelujah. Toda, Bradley, hallelujah. And Don Mikael, you have the floor.
I'm a follow Bradley. I just want to sing a song. When the spirit of Yahweh moved upon my heart, I will sing like David sang. And when the spirit of Yahweh moves upon my heart, I will sing like David sang. I will sing, I will sing, I will sing like David sang. I will sing, I will sing, I will sing like David sang. And when the spirit of Yahweh moves upon my heart, I will sing like David sang. And when the spirit of Yahweh moves upon my heart, I will sing like David sang. Oh, I will sing, I will sing, I will sing like David sang. Oh, I will sing, I will sing, I will sing like David sang. And when the spirit of Yahweh moves upon my heart, I will sing like David sang. And when the spirit of Yahweh moved upon my heart, I will sing like David sang. Oh, I will sing, I will sing, I will sing like David sang. And I will sing, I will sing, I will sing like David sang. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah, hallelujah. All right, Miss Cobb, we turn over to Moreh Shema for the culture study.
Gosh,
What do you got?
hallelujah, Mr. Prakash. Shabbat Shalom. Can I be heard well?
Okay.
Okay, hallelujah. All right, Mr. Prakash, we're going to get started with this week's culture portion, and we're going to be on this topic for the next probably couple of weeks because I can't cover it all in one sitting. So there was a question that came up probably about 3 Shabbats ago in reference to why Elohim is being used and not Elohim or with the A class vowel. So I want to start this culture portion off today just talking about the Hebrew language just a little bit. Okay, so I know culturally, you know, our language is Hebrew. But one thing we have to understand is there are different dialects of Hebrew, right? And we're trying to learn our way back to the Hebrew. So, and I'm not trying to be offensive to anyone, either online that may view this. I'm not trying to be offensive to any of our members that may use different dialects. I'm just trying to be as informative as possible as one is presenting this information, and also going to share with you the reason why I stand where I stand with the dialects that I choose to use at this current time. All right, so one of the things that we have to understand is there are different pronunciation systems in Hebrew. So there are different pronunciation systems of Hebrew. What does that mean? There's different dialects. So you have different systems, some of them to name them. You have Yemenite Hebrew, Sephardi, Ashkenaz, Tiberian, Samaritan. You have what's called Lashon Kodesh, Lashawan Kodash. All those are different pronunciation systems, meaning those that may subscribe to one form of Hebrew, they will pronounce their words same or similar ways. Now, here's the thing. Even in those different systems, depending on where you are with using a certain system, you may still pronounce words differently than others may pronounce the words, okay? So we just want to kind of go into this from a culture perspective. And one of the things I want to say before really getting further into this is we currently are trying to return to the ancient paths of old. We're trying to learn our culture, our traditions, our customs, the laws that the Most High has given us. We're trying to return back to being those people. One of the things that we have done in our return is we knock everything that's presented that we want to say that a Gentile may present to us, when majority of the books and everything that we have today, Gentiles still write. And there are things that are written in some of these books that are informative for us to return to on our actual ancient path, because remember it says that the Goyim actually dwelt in the tents of Shem. So a lot of times us trying to return back to the past of old, there are going to be people that have our information. They know more about our information than we know about our information. Therefore, in order for us to return to our information, first and foremost, we need the Ruach of Yah, yes, came. But then also there's going to be material and literature and things that are written and much research that we can do to kind of find our way back to the path as close to possible. What we do is we become shallow-minded, and so when we want to make something our way, and we want to claim our heritage, and we the people, we want to say this is affirmative, this is how it is. When a lot of us have not even heard Hebrew spoken, and even for the ones of us that makes our boast of being Hebrew Israelites, we don't even know the language. We know a few words. That is the truth. We know a few words, and so we take a few words and we take things that others say and we run with it. So what I stopped doing was running with everything that I heard when I first came into the walk. So when I first came into the walk, and this is not a knock, I don't knock any Hebrew dialect. The issue that we have is people want to be the dominant one, and I'm 100% correct. I've just shared with you, there's many pronunciation systems, and they pronounce words differently. So I will not knock any system that anyone uses because they're all still Hebrew, all right? They just have different dialects. So before going back into those systems, I want to explain the word dialect. Dialect, it says a form of a language that people speak in a particular part of a country containing same or different words and grammar, etc. That's from the Cambridge Dictionary, all right? So again, it says dialect, a form of a language that people speak in a particular part of a country containing some different words and grammar, etc. So depending on what area or region one may dwell in, depending on what tribe you may dwell amongst, whether you are a northerner, a southerner, Midwest, Easterner, your dialect may be different. There's different rules that may be used because whomever the forefathers of your tribe or your nation or your community is, they would have been the ones that would pass down from generation to generation how that community, that neighborhood, that region was speaking and certain rules that were being utilized. We gave an example the first week this question was asked when we asked Adon Abadal about El Spaniel in Spanish, and he put some Spanish things up. Even in the Spanish language, depending on what region, or whether you're Cuban, or whether you're Puerto Rican, or whether you're Mexican, there's certain terms that though each person is speaking Spanish, there's some words that may not be understood the same way based upon dialect or the region and some of the grammar differences, all right? So again, dialect, a form of a language that people speak in a particular part of a country containing some different words and grammar, etc. So that's the Cambridge Dictionary. Second definition I have, a particular form of language which is peculiar to a specific region and or social group. That's from the Oxford Dictionary. Again, it says a particular form of a language which is peculiar to a specific region or social group. That's the Oxford Dictionary. And then another definition of dialect says dialect spoken by a smaller group. So depending on if you're a smaller group, you don't associate with everyone else. You may have your own customs, your own traditions, your own dialect of speaking, but one thing that's key in both of these is the word language. So it says a form of a language or a particular language. So Hebrew is a language. And the same with any other language, Hebrew will have different pronunciations, it will have different dialects. So what we have to stop doing is judging brothers and sisters and others who may use different dialects and saying they're not speaking Hebrew, or that's not real Hebrew. It is actually still the language because the alphabet or the alphabet system, you know, the alphabet has the same numerical value. It has the same meaning. So the meanings are not changing. What's happening is how phonetically someone pronounces the sound or by the system that they use, whether they use vowels or they don't use vowels. All right. So going further, going back to now the different pronunciation systems. So you have Yemenite, Sephardi, Ashkenaz, Tiberian, Samaritan, Lashon Kodesh, Lashawan Kodash. So those are all different. Now the final two, I'm using them for the purposes of what we use in Hebrew community, right? But what I'm using the other ones for is because Yemenite, that's a group of people. Sephardi, that's a specific group of people. Ashkenaz is a group of people, and Tiberian are some people. Lashon Kodesh and Lashawan Kodesh is saying what I prefer to speak, but I still put them down because they are functional or they are actually recognized pronunciation systems, all right? But I'm going to be sharing some things, and again, not trying to be offensive, only being informative. So when I first came to the walk 20 plus years ago, all praise to the Most High, like 26 to 27 years now, I'm going on this walk, praise be to the Most High. I came in, and the school of thought that I was a part of, talk was commonly called Lashawan Kodash, okay? Lashawan Kodash was where I started my journey with Hebrew. Lashawan Kodash is the dialect that you will see a lot of Hebrew Israelites utilize, and it's more so when people reference certain Israelites, they have it. Some people say, I'm not in the camp. Some people say, I am in the camp. So you would say it would be more of what people commonly consider camp dialect. And when they say camp, they're talking about the main ones that you see out on the street corners speaking. And when most people refer to camps, they're speaking of the ones that are more so filled with the hate and things like that. It's a certain doctrine that comes with it from the One West school of thought. I'm not ashamed to say I started there, and I'm not ashamed to say that that is still Hebrew. Whereas in some people that use a different dialect of Hebrew, they are now knocking that dialect and making mockery of their brothers. And what they won't admit, like what I'm admitting, is I started there, which most Hebrews, or I'm not going to use the term most, a lot of Hebrews did, or at least their Moreh, their teacher, their Shalak, their taught one who's teaching them started there, or at least had a base understanding. And at Lashawan Kodash Hebrew, with that pronunciation system, everything is an A-class vowel. Everything has an A-class vowel. I'm in agreement with that because if you go into your Strong's Concordance or any Hebrew grammar book, the root words of Hebrew generally have an A-class vowel system, meaning shalom. First, when you look it up in the concordance, you may see S-H-A-L-A-M, shalom. A lot of the words have an A-class root system. But beyond that, it actually expands, and there are actually other vowels that I now subscribe to for a language to be functional myself personally, okay? And for my studies and actually understanding some other things that I'll share with you a little later, all right? So now the Tiberian, I want to focus on two dialects or two pronunciation systems. One is the Yemenite and the other is the Tiberian. So Zaken Yaquab, the elder, has already taught and spoke about the Nakub vowel point system. So what a lot of people commonly call modern Hebrew, I would rather use the term biblical Hebrew. A lot of the biblical Hebrew that we're reading or that we're studying from is actually going to be using the Tiberian Masoret vowel pointed system, which we call Nakub system. Now, one thing that I've learned over my time of study, and the reason why I come to the conclusion I've come to, and I've learned to humble myself and not be so quick to knock others, is because much research will start to show you many differences of opinions, and it will show you many arguments that have existed way before we come to the knowledge of the truth, and they've always existed. So at some point we have to say, you know what? No one really 100% knows, or someone may 100% know, and we may not know them, but until the Creator gives us that pure 100% dialect that He will return us to, as it's written in the text, He said, I will return to you a pure language. Until the Creator actually returns us to a pure language, we're doing the best that we can in the systems that we have currently. But so now, with that being said, the Tiberian is the Hebrew in which most of the books are translated from today, or the vowel system that's being used, and what's commonly called the biblical Hebrew, or what a lot of people call the modern Hebrew. The reason why I don't want to call it modern is because modern Hebrew has words that were not biblical words. They have now expanded words. They have TV, VCR, refrigerator, words that wasn't used in biblical text. So biblical Hebrew and modern Hebrew is a lot alike, but they still have differences. Why? Because modern Hebrew has modern vernacular or modern words that's used currently, and things that have come into existence that wasn't in existence in time of old. All right. So what I will say is, for the Tiberian, they gave vowel points in a vowel system, right? The purpose of that vowel system, when they put it in, was so that whenever they came together communally or in common or together, they were trying to preserve a one-way dialect of them speaking the word. So everyone would be speaking things different ways. Because if you read an actual ancient Torah manuscript that was written in ancient Hebrew, not the modern script that we have, or the Hebrew alphabet that's being used, but the more ancient script that would have been written in the Paleo Hebrew had no vowel points written. So it would have to be any man or woman that would pick up a Torah scroll and would read from that scroll. They would be reading the letters only, not understanding what vowel sounds that ancients of those before them might have used. And so we would still have many pronunciation differences. So the reason for the Tiberian Masoretes entering these things in were to try to have a unified way of saying, anyone that picks up this book, if we leave books and things written that show them how to pronounce these words, they will now know how to go in and look at the consonants, and we've added the vowel points underneath, and the vowel points added underneath will let them know what vowel sounds would actually go into this word. So this is going to be, again, there's a lot of information. So so what happens is when we come to Hebrew Israelite community, we knock everything that was done before time because we coming from a taught mindset that everything was designed to trick us. When if you actually go back and you study a little bit more about the Tiberian Masoretes themselves, a lot of their vowel pointing, the things that they did was not to cause us to stumble, because they vowel pointed it. What has happened is modern Jewish people, the religion, the new Jewish people have been using what the Tiberians used, and then they themselves also have inserted things, or they've altered the way things are pronounced. Such as when it comes to the name of the Creator, they put Hashem. Hashem is not necessarily written in the place where the Creator's name is written in the text. It is written and vowel pointed, but they tell you it should be vowel pointed this way or that way. The Tiberian Masoretes didn't do that. Modern Jewish people have done that because of their doctrine and their theology stance. Okay, so we've gotten so accustomed to knocking everything, we're not understanding. The same way Paul gets a bad name in the Brit Kyle shops being a false prophet, because they're saying Paul said this in the church when Paul didn't say certain things. Paul kept the law, but Paul gets a bad name, right? It's the same thing with the Tiberian Masoretes. They're getting credit for things they did not do. For an example, in some of my study of even the Tiberian Masoretes, there are certain letters in modern Hebrew and even what's commonly called biblical Hebrew that when you look in the biblical Hebrew grammar book, so on and so forth, they would tell you that there's certain letters that are silent. And these two letters are Aleph and Ayin. Aleph and Ayin. But Hebrew is a Shemitic language. A Shemitic language meaning we come from the seed of Shem, and it's a Shemitic language. There were more than just Hebrews or Israelites that come from the loins of Shem. There was other people and other children that Shem had, which made other nations. And so there are other Shemitic languages, which a lot of us, and again, I'm not trying to say this in a condescending way, we have no knowledge of. Our thought process is shallow. So there are many Shemitic languages. So you have Hebrew, you have Aramaic, you have Arabic, you have Akkadian, you have Ge'ez, you have Amharic. Amharic is not Aramaic, it's another Amharic. You have Ugaritic. You have all these different Semitic languages. So in looking at Semitic languages, what you will find is they have an alphabet system. So the alphabet does not look alike, but a lot of the alphabet still have the same values, or they still have the same sounds. The script of writing looks different. So therefore, I cannot read Amharic or I cannot read Arabic. However, Arabic, which is a cousin language to Hebrew, and the way a lot of our modern sounds, when they try to reconstruct the Hebrew language to bring it to be used today for a lot of modern speakers, they use actually a lot of Arabic influence to try to recreate the sound, because they know that Arabic and Aramaic is actually pretty much the same pronunciation as Hebrew. The lettering system is just different. So you may not be able to understand Arabic writing, but when you ask them the name of letters, we have ayin, they have ayin. They have a gain, a on. They have certain letters that we have in Hebrew. And so when those people are trying to return back to the sounds of Hebrew, they're using a lot of Arabic influence, which a lot of times we want to knock, right? So back to the point. There's a dialect that many look at as a more pure or more close to ancient or close to what scholars perceive to be more correct, even more correct than the Tiberian Hebrew, which is the Masoretes, which would be the Yemenite Hebrew. So the Yemenite Hebrew are the so-called Yahudim or Jews that live in Yemen. And they spoke the dialect which is their system called Yemenite Hebrew system. They too use a vowel pointed system, and even if they use the Nakud vowel pointed system for Yemenite Hebrews, they don't use the vowel pointed system exactly the same. So they still have a vowel pointing system. Now, just like our patak, and I need one of our Hebrew students to help me with this, what sound does patak make in what we commonly call modern or biblical Hebrew? One of the Hebrew students, what sound does patak make? Or one of the sounds that patak make? Somebody got their hand up?
Where is Amir?
What'd you say? So it represents an A sound, right? Keep it unmuted. What sound does Segal make? So thank you, Shemaya. So Patak makes a ah sound, or some may say ah, they may shorten it up, and Segal makes an S sound. In Yemenite Hebrew, it says Segal and Patak makes the same sound. So now this is kind of, and the reason why I'm going here is some of the stuff that I'm saying, and again, I'm not trying to be offensive, I have to keep flying that statement, but some of you don't even understand what I'm saying now. So the point that I'm making is with the vowel points, Segal, which makes an E, which represents the E vowel, with the Tiberian, or what's commonly called the biblical Hebrew, represents an E or E sound in modern or biblical Hebrew. The Yemenite, which backdates Tiberian Hebrew, that did not use the same exact system, even when they're using their vowel point system, they use a Segal and a Patak the same way as a ah sound, which now goes back to a question that the sister was asking, is in reference to why E versus A, all right? So, but that might not have even been caught because we don't know the language yet. We don't even know the biblical or the modern, and certain questions that may be presented, some may be lost in the explanation, but over time, you will get into Hebrew class, which we're going to start trying to dedicate at least 2 Shabbats a month to actually going into some thorough Hebrew class, because I see now, and I'm excited myself, that many are now wanting to get into the language, right? So we would dedicate 2 Shabbats that we will have Hebrew class going forward. And so I would say that for further questions and really want to get into a lot of this information, please, when we put the announcement out of the Shabbats we'll be doing, the Hebrew class, please join into the class, because if we're not going into the information and the research and the studies together and sharing the resources and the references, then a lot of the stuff is just going to sound like Greek to all of us that's on the line, right? So again, they use the Segal and the Patak in Yemenite Hebrew, still pronounce the same vowel sound, the same common vowel sound, which is the A class vowel and not the E class vowel. Okay, so a lot of the modern scholars, they give credit to the Yemenites for preserving what they consider a more pure Hebrew, or closer to what they think Hebrew would sound like in ancient times. But again, the Tiberian Masoretes, the reason for them using their system was to try to have a unified way of pronouncing words. So when you're coming together, everybody's not all over the place and saying things that people can't understand. And one of the problems in our community is we cannot become a cod on nothing. We cannot become a cod on the name. We cannot become a cod on Hebrew dialect. And that's not fault to the community. That's fault to us individuals sometimes. Because the community as whole is we are the nation of Israel. But if we actually understand what the scripts say, within a community, there are communities. So then sometimes communities will have, this is how we do things here. This is the dialect that we use, and we can't even get a cod as a community, meaning the smaller group that say, we study together, we are Mishpachah, we're trying to learn together. A lot of times we're all over the place because we're grabbing everything out of the air and running with every wind of doctrine. So culturally, I've taught lessons, and the reason why I said we was going to start having more discussions on Shabbat and continue going forth with lessons, because we're going into lessons not fully understanding them, I don't believe. Because I did a teaching on sheep and shepherd, and we started and we built from Psalms, from the book of Psalms, when it says, Yah is my shepherd, I shall not want. You know, he makes me to lie down in green pastures, lead me beside still waters. We went into what shepherds do. Shepherds actually lead the sheep to still water. Shepherds actually lead the sheep to green pastures, where to feed from, what to eat, when to eat, because we don't want you eating everything. So Yah took Israel the long way to the land of Canaan, took them through the wilderness. Why? Because he knew that if they would experience certain things going the short way, they would turn back. So as a shepherd, Yah leads us. So then as under shepherds, as us that are learning and have been in the walk for a while, there's things that we've grown into. There's things that we've grown from. There's our understanding, a level of understanding of increase. We've had to go back and repent of how we've knocked other people for things that we were taught that we did not yet research for ourselves. And once we went to researching, then what, you know, my statement is I'm just trying to teach it clean. So me trying to teach it clean, meaning I'm not fluent in Hebrew, and y'all hear me say it all the time. I may sound fluent to some. I'm going to continue to tell y'all I'm not fluent in Hebrew the same way I'm not fluent in English, because what most of us don't know, it tells you need to know 10,000 words in the language to be considered fluent. So I don't know 10,000 English words, and I definitely don't know close to 10,000 Hebrew words. But most people will make their boast of being fluent when a lot of us are not actually fluent at all in Hebrew, all right? So I'm going to stay in that and try to just teach things clean and not knock others where they are. So I know this is going very long, but we have to go here because in order to respond to the question, we need some of this information. So the term biblical Hebrew, If I was to ask someone what's biblical Hebrew, what would you tell me? I need some participation from the floor. If the term biblical Hebrew, what does it mean to you? Shalom, yes, sir.
King Shabbat Shalom Moreh and Mishra. Biblical Hebrew, as in what's written in the text when we read Torah and Tanakh.
Okay, so you said what's biblical text as what's written in Torah and Tanakh, Torah Adon Shashamar, yes, sir.
Yeah, and that's somewhere. So I would say when we go into the Hebrew or the Hebrew within the scriptures that we read, when we check out the Strong's numbers, but also the vowel points or the pronunciation system that we read when we go into scriptures versus the modern day Hebrew that we read in a lot of the modern texts. I yield.
Okay, so I like both answers, but can you say yours again? And I hope I ain't throw you off, Adon. What did you say you believe it to be again?
When we read in the scriptures, like the actual Hebrew we read when we go to the Wood or Bible or use the Strong's numbers, I consider that the biblical Hebrew
Okay,
versus.
so that's told well, yeah, that's want everybody hear that again. So what Shlomo said, the Hebrew as we are reading in the Tanakh, or that we are reading that come forth from the Tanakh of the Torah, and what you're saying is what we're reading pretty much in our Bibles, what we're reading when we go to the Strong's Concordance, when we go to the Blue Letter Bible, you're calling that biblical Hebrew. And so again, to understand terms, the term biblical Hebrew is generally used to refer to the form of the language that appears in printed edition of the Hebrew Bible. So what's in the printed edition of the Hebrew Bible, and if I was to ask anyone, I'm not going to ask, I'm going to ask, and then I'm going to actually answer myself. If you would ask anybody what's the Hebrew Bible, what most people are going to tell you the Hebrew Bible is going to be the Old Testament. The Old Testament is referred to as the Hebrew Bible. So as written in the Hebrew Bible, meaning those that have the Hebrew translation translated over from the Hebrew into English, the Hebrew Bible is being transliterated or transliterated from Hebrew to be presented where we can read it in our English text. That's the Hebrew Bible. So it says, as printed in the Hebrew Bible. So biblical Hebrew is what's written in most of the printed books and the resources that we have, such as Adon Shashamar said, the Strong's Concordance, the Blue Letter Bible, any of those reference aids that we go to, they have what's commonly called the biblical Hebrew, because they're using the Tiberian Masoretic vowel pointed system, and the words that comes over into the English, they're transliterated. And there's a difference. So there's a word called transliteration, and there's a word called translation. So translation is when you bring words from one language over into your language for you to have the meaning or to define the words in your language. Transliteration is bringing over the sound from one language to another language. So you bring over the sound. So words translate, but names don't translate. You can't translate a person's name. You transliterate a name. So if Shah Shamar name is Shah Shamar, then when we go into another language, you're still going to try to make the sound Shah Shamar. If Shalomo name is Shalomo in Hebrew, then when you go over to English, you're going to still try to bring it over as Shalomo. You're going to try to use the lettering system that you have currently, and you're going to try to match the sounds and spell words out in transliteration format that when it's in script form, a person go and sound it out in their language, those names. So again, transliteration is bringing over the sound of a word into another language. The sound, names do not translate, they transliterate, okay? The sound is brought over. So, and with that, so the biblical Hebrew is transliterated as well as translated from that dialect or the Tiberian Masoretic vowel pointing system, right? And more so we focused on the transliteration because meaning people that was reading it that way. The names, when you see names of places and people, those are what's transliterated from the Tiberian Masoretic vowel pointing and brought over to the biblical Hebrew. And then we have to look names and things up. You're going and you're looking in those Strong's Concordance or in the Hebrew aid books. You're looking in those printed texts and they're matched and they're compared with the Tiberian Masoretic vowel system. So from an academic standpoint, the reason why, as I stated at our Knesset, we're starting with the biblical Hebrew first. We're starting with the biblical Hebrew first is because we're trying to read for understanding, to read the understanding of the word. As Adon Abadal said when we first started this discourse, he said, is it more important of how we sound speaking a language, or is it for us to get more understanding and to be able to understand what we're reading and understand each other when we're speaking, right? So these have to be And so I got something from my brother Rosh Shema, and he said we have to know the goal of each individual. Is their goal to learn the language for the function of interpreting it? Is it to be able to speak it and communicate with others, or just to be different? So if we have different goals in mind, then it's cool to learn the different dialects. But if it's for the sake of communicating, understanding what the word says, to be able to be seen as one that actually knows what you're talking about, you know, there is a system in place that there will be those that will accept and those that will reject based upon. Now, the academic world of academia is not always right in what they do, but the point being, if you want to be accepted or you want to be able to communicate and sound like you have some logic or some what's another word for logic? Some logical or some concrete or somewhat concrete or solid information, it needs to be able to be supported by witnesses. So again, I come from the Lashawan Kodash system, but you will not find many resources or hardly any resources, or what you're going to find is a lot of modern resources on Lashawan Kodash and how it functions as a language. And, you know, so again, I'm not knocking, I still subscribe to the A-class file system, and some of the words that I still utilize, I use from that pronunciation system, which we explain later down the line. However, if you're speaking it to anyone in any instance, if you go into a Jewish synagogue, if you go to the land of Israel, if you go to the majority Hebrew Israelite congregations, a lot of them will laugh you out of the room for Lashawan Kodash. I don't laugh people out the room. I still subscribe to it, but a lot of them do because they don't use that dialect. Now, when we see what we think to be the majority, it's the people that we see the majority of the time on Facebook and on YouTube that's constantly out there doing their work. And I commend my brothers from the camps that's diligent and they out there in the streets, put forth the work, standing on what they believe and waking our people up to the best of their ability. Kwam Yasha Allah. You know, I'm going to say Kwam Yasha Allah to those brothers. I would never make mockery of their dialect and what they're speaking because I come from that and they're still doing a great work. However, a lot of people look at them as the majority, but the majority Hebrew congregations or any synagogue that we may ever visit, and most assemblies that we actually fellowship with ourselves currently at present time, they use pretty much the Tiberian or the biblical Hebrew system. I've seen when we've had people come visit many years ago, and I'm talking over 10, 15 years ago, people will come visit the Knesset before we grew and we opened our understanding more to Hebrew from and being all things to all people. I've seen people come and they've enjoyed service with us, and then I've seen a sister go and greet the sisters on the way out, and everybody was looking lost, and she was basically telling everybody she loved them and Shabbat Tov. She was telling them, y'all have a good week, but no one can identify what she was saying, so it was like we were foreigners to each other because she was speaking a more biblical or modern dialect, and we were still just only understanding the what we commonly called at the time the Paleo or the ancient dialect, which I'm still not knocking, but for the sake of information, I'm trying to explain that the majority of places you go, for it to sound like you actually have some learned behavior. You put in some studies, you put the time in, you put in the effort. It's going to be that you know these different systems and actually know which system functions in society today on the majority of assemblies or congregations or for communication purposes that we have today. All right, where we were at on time. So today's going to be introduction. Next week I'm going to get more into the language as far as the function and explaining some of the things and going into the name and things like that. So one of the things that we used to do, and I'm just sharing some Hebrew culture history and some modern Hebrew culture history, meaning we who have converted to our now mindset of knowing that we're Hebrews. When I came in, we were taught Lashawan Kodash, and I was with that. And we made mockery because I was trained to do so of the other dialect, and we called it Yiddish. I found out that was far from the truth. And we were making mockery of it and saying this was the Hebrew dialect, and Lashawan Kodash means holy language, means set apart tongue. Lashawan Kodash means set apart tongue. But people that's using Yemenite Hebrew, Sephardi Hebrew, Ashkenazi Hebrew, Tiberian, Samaritan Hebrew would say they also use Lashon Kodesh, a Lashon Kodash. So when I seen it, I'm like, Lashawan Kodash, Lashon Kodesh, a Lashon Kodash means the same thing. So we're using a term that's a universal term, but based upon a dialect that one may use, they're still saying we speak the what? The set apart tongue. So I thought Lashawan Kodash was specific to us, but Lashon Kodesh or Lashon Kodash is still something that's used universally, meaning This is the holy language. So as I started to mature and I researched things, I found these things out. And then brothers that was in the truth longer than then they started sharing videos. And you know what startled me or threw me a little bit? Because I was taught one way and my mind was programmed. But then what I seen was the elders, that was the elders of our school reading fluently in biblical Hebrew. Fluent. They never told us that, because when I came in, they were no longer using, they were not doing Lashawan Kodash only. But they were fluent in it. That's what they was teaching in, and they were very fluent with it. So if you were once fluent in something, why would you knock it instead of saying, well, I changed from this to that? But they was all out knocking it. And then also, part of what we have to stand on with us saying that the Lashawan Kodash dialect is the one true dialect is one of our elders said a Malakim gave it to him. But that elder didn't write no books. That elder didn't give any function of the language. And so, again, I'm not knocking. I still have respect for the elder. Praise the Most High, because that elder is one of the reasons why a lot of us know a lot of things that we know that I've even shared with you now. But still, it says that a Malakim came to him and gave him that language. So prior to, they were speaking biblical Hebrew. And there's things that when we go into some of our culture, we're going to have to also go into modern Hebrew Israelite culture, meaning splits that have taken place. When we're going to go into some of the origins of certain assemblies and who used to be together and who separated, what were they doing when they were together, what were the differences that separated them. So a lot of these things, what we're going to go into culturally, so that we can actually get to a point of saying, you know what, I'm not going to be Pharisaic in nature, I'm not going to be judgmental in nature, and I'm not going to be boastful and prideful in what I'm doing, understanding that this is not my preference, this is my choice, and this is how we do in our community, not knocking any other community, all right? So with that, the term biblical Hebrew, once again, is generally used to refer to the form of the language that appears in printed edition of the Hebrew Bible. Grammatical Hebrew textbooks are based on this form of Hebrew as well. So one reason why me as a Moreh or as a teacher now, that I subscribe to this to more of the modern dialect at this time. And again, like I told you, I use a mixed dialect, and we'll talk about those things as we go through. I use a mixed dialect, but a lot of it's going to sound more modern in pronunciation, or shlika, more biblical in pronunciation. Why? Because from an academic standpoint, from going places and people trying to challenge your credibility, so your credibility is challenged. So if you go, and it's happened to me before, we've had a member here that wanted to invite me, not literally here now, but I'm talking many years ago, about 15 years ago, they wanted to invite me somewhere. And the issue that they had with us was they were of Gentile of nature, not being offensive, but they were Gentile of nature. But they were with us and we loved them all the same. But to them, I think they had an issue with receiving us as Hebrews, right? As the people. Mm-hmm. So I was invited to a gathering, and when I got to the gathering, it was Gentile Jews. And when we got in there, what they wanted to do was try to throw the Hebrew and stuff out and, try to see if I was actually valid and where I was at. And then I believe there was a little trouble after we left there, because now the people was wanting me to pretty much present. So I ended up being a presenter at this gathering that we went to, but they really was sabotaging me to have me taken someplace to make me look like I didn't know what I was talking about. So from experiences also, I've learned that sometimes it is good, as Paul said, be all things to all people. So for you to be accepted and to be looked at as, what you talk about custom in modern times, you need to be able to know these things that you can go to the books and support what you're talking about, versus having something that at least I've heard where it's supposed to have come from. And instead of just saying, I'm going to stick with preference, I'm going to stick with the parts that I prove to be true, as it says in Thessalonians. Prove all things, hold fast to that which is true, and reject the portion that you no longer see as being 100% truth or even close to truth. So I retain the parts that I've learned as true, but I've still grown, right? So as a teacher that's teaching others the language, if we're going to go to other assemblies, they're using biblical Hebrew. They're using textbooks to teach their congregants, their members, their brothers and sisters the language. And in order for us to communicate and have unity Shabbats together, a lot of the times the unity Shabbats for those who will gather with us, because the group that I come from will not even really be accepting of us, because they will call us Gentile lovers and all types of other things. And a lot of them just don't associate outside of their group. So it's not really likely that we will fellowship with many of them that use that dialect hardly ever, because a lot of them will not even be accepting of us. But the assemblies that we do fellowship with, and those assemblies, and whether Torah only or whether they believe in Mashiach, the Torah only, and as I've stated before when I first started this lesson, a lot of times the Hebrews that you find speaking fluent Hebrew in our community, with the exception of a few of the Moreh that are now getting more fluent in the Hebrew in our community, meaning those of us who converted our minds to understanding who we were, the Torah-only community has very fluent Hebrew-speaking people. They grew up speaking it, so they hold conversation in it. And one of the things, you know, and so what I do also is I don't only present my information, I do peer review. And the peer review is going to your peers and asking them questions about where you are, what you understand, asking them about what they understand, and we compare notes and certain things. And so one of the things that Rosh Shema showed me also is what he does is he actually goes amongst Hebrew speakers, not just Hebrew Israelites, but he goes amongst natives that speaks more of the Hebrew to get more of the sound, you know, the sound of people that are fluently speaking it, to be more functional with the language and to mature more himself in the language. And so there are people such as Moreh Moreh Shael, Rosh Shema, and several others. They are actually, they're more into the linguist side of things. They're into the language like that. So they are more fluent than I am, more fluent than a lot of the other Moreh that are saying that they are teaching Hebrew. And, you know, and Rosh and Shael, that's pretty much what they do. They are teaching Hebrew, they're teaching Hebrew. So they diligently put into studying the language, all right? So I just want to share that information. So in closing, to get to a portion of, I'm going to share my other screen for a moment. Y'all bear with me. Where's Zoom at? Zoom, on with it. Let's see. All right. All right. So the word in question is close, I think. All right, so the top one, and again, I'm writing in my lap, so Mr. McCall, bear with me, it's not that neat. So if you read, I'm going to go over the Hebrew alphabet for those who are not really familiar with them. So I'm just going to read the alphabet first. So we have the first letter, and Hebrew's read from right to left. So we have Aleph, Lamed, Hey, Yod, Mem. All right. How can we get that? Is that those words that are on the top? The scene on the screen. How do we get that off? You know. Can we adjust the screen? Can this? Zaken Yaquab, are you seeing use tools and objects on your screen?
King Moreh.
I don't know how to get that off. Trying to. It's not showing on my screen. And it's kind of
not in the way. If you go back, move your text back to the middle. It's all those little tags are not in the way.
Okay, Torah. All right. So again, we have Aleph, Lamed, Hey, Yod, Mem. So this is the word that we have for Elohim or Elohim, or some say Elohim. So what we have as Zaken, I think did you highlight that for me, or did I do that? So the top one has vowel points. The bottom one does not have vowel points. So in written in text without vowel points, it will be written without the vowel points. And so one would have to try to identify what that would be without the vowel points, so they would pronounce it how they might pronounce it, right? Mm-hmm. So what the vowel points is done is try to help us with the pronunciation of it. So the first one, I'm going to write the vowels separately now. The first one has this vowel, which is the sagal that I was speaking about earlier, which is the E vowel that makes the sound as S in bed. And then you have another vowel, which is the Shiwa written under that Aleph. And the Shiwa tells you to either hurry a sound or shorten the sound, right? So now what you have under the aleph is you have what's called a combination vowel. Generally and normally there's one vowel point under a vowel, but now under the aleph you have what's called a combination vowel because you have a shiwa along with the sagol under the aleph. At next to the L you have the dot, which is here. I don't know why I wrote it on screen. I'm trying to. They can't see it. Okay, so it's a singular dot that's written right by the lamed. That's what you call a holem, which makes an O sound. Then under the hey, you have a dot, which is called cherek, which makes a E as in B sound. E as in B sound, right? So that's what you have commonly, Elohim, Elohim. Now, because when you spell it in English, we have, let me go back to where this is written so I can make sure. And English, again, is written from left to right. So you have commonly what's called Elohim, right? But the issue is because we know that the ed makes an E sound. When we're looking at it in English, we're going heavy with the E sound. So we're going Elohim. But the Shiwa in front of the Segal is telling you, you hurry that sound, so you don't put so much emphasis on so you're not trying to make it heavily on the E. So it's more like Elohim, 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 which goes now, if you go down to the bottom one with no vowel points. So to the question that was asked, now let me erase this for a moment. Well, let me put it like this way first. So the question was, why would it be Elohim and not Elohim, right? The reason being is there's two letters in Hebrew, in biblical Hebrew, or in the modern Hebrew, I would say. They would tell you there's two letters that are solid. One of them is Aleph. So they tell you that the Aleph is solid and it has no sound except for that which the vowels underneath it makes. And the other one is Ayin. And they tell you that Ayin is also solid. But Hebrew, again, is a Shemitic language. And my reason for saying it's a Shemitic language, because in the other Shemitic languages that's Shemitic, that come from Shem, these other languages have same letters, and every consonant makes a sound. So in ancient Hebrew, in modern Hebrew, and even not modern Hebrew, in ancient Hebrew, Tiberian Hebrew, Yemenite Hebrew, and what should be biblical Hebrew, there should be a sound for these letters, because in the ancient time, the phonetic sound, they would have had a sound because they're Shemitic language. So each consonant did have a sound. The reason why they say they don't have a sound modernly is because people started omitting the sound because it has a lot of European influence. And so there were sounds that some people couldn't make. And because these two sounds are actually hard to make, they're what you would call gluteal sounds or glottal stops. And I can go into some other terms as well. But for the sake of the day where I'm about to end at, is these are sounds that you pronounce in your throat. So they're more of a throaty sound. So the ayin is more specific. It's more like, like you make it in your throat, right? Aleph is also, like you stump your toe, like you kind of stump your toe, it's a sound that you make from your throat, like that quick reaction, and ayin makes, more of a in your throat sound, but they pretty much make the same sound. So if you look at it in Arabic and Ugaritic and other, not Ugaritic, but if you look at it in the Arabic and in Yemenite, you'll see that a lot of the time they're still trying to pronounce it. And you have those that speak Hebrew, some currently today from certain schools of thought, when they in their pronunciation system, they say for the sake of remembering the letters there, they still try to pronounce it. But a lot of times they don't pronounce it themselves either, because currently many people don't make the sound because it's too hard to try to make the sound. But to be mindful of the letter that's there, they still actually make the sound. So because of the European influence in trying to make those gluteal sounds that Shemitic people will make, because they're not Shemitic, it's harder for them to make certain sounds. So when you hear Arabic people speak, if you ever go to the Arabic shop and they start speaking in Arabic to you, you hear a lot of glottal stops, or gluteal sounds that really throat or really heavy sounds, right? So Aleph and Ayin actually does make a vowel sound. So back to the question that the sister asked, why Elohim and not Elohim, is because modernly and currently, with the influence of the dialect that many use today, they're using the vowel pointing system and they're using Elohim. But when we read it in English, a lot of English readers are not reading it with accent. They're not reading it with the actual sound of the dialect that it would be from a native speaker. So we're focusing on our English, Elohim. We're calling off every syllable, and we're looking at each letter, and that's why it sounded that way. But for many who don't want to use the vowel pointing system, based upon the Yemenite Hebrew, the Segal makes the same sound as Patak anyway, which means they would pronounce that aleph as an A still. So it would be more Elohim or Elohim. Elohim, Elohim. Elohim, Elohim, Elohim. Elohim, Elohim, Elohim. Could y'all tell the difference? I'm going to do it again and see if y'all can catch it. And another reason why things sound the way they sound today is because a lot of times we want to let everybody know I'm different. We try for you to hear the difference in one letter or vowel sound. So now I'm going to say some things. I want y'all to tell me if you can tell what I'm saying. Elohim, Elohim, Elohim. Can y'all tell me what I said the first time, the second time, third time? Anyone, could you catch it? Elohim, Elohim, Elohim. I have my hands up. Yes, sir, Shashamar.
Yeah, I mean, they sound similar, but one of the sounds you use more of the throat.
So one of the sounds I use more the throat, right? So that's gonna be the one when you want to use the vowel, the consonant as the consonant. So it makes the throaty sound, and so we don't have the accent when we're trying to speak Hebrew. We still have our English and European sound, even how we're speaking the ancient language. And so that's also making it where we're identifying letters. Say, is it an A or an E? When in actuality, as long as we know the value of the name, what it means, and we have it translated properly, that's Tomio. But whether we use Elohim or Elohim, 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 you're saying the same thing. And that's not a big difference. So in closing, because like I said, I'm going to pick up next week. So the reason why I've been teaching the biblical is because of the sake of unity, the sake of sounding as if we know what we're talking about, because the biblical is, as Shashamar Shalomo gave definition of themselves, of what it is, it's what's being brought over. So when you go to the book of Joshua, we know Joshua has the same name as the Mashiach. So you will hear somebody in Hebrew may say Yehoshua, Yeshua, Joshua, right? So you can still hear it, and you can see that when it's brought over into the English, Yehoshua, Joshua, Yehoshua, Joshua. You can kind of still identify the name and the word, the sound. You can see what was trying to be brought over from the script, the Hebrew script, into the English. And then we have to look it up. There's going to be words that are written. Now, we do not agree to everything that's written in the concordance with how they've done things, because, again, the modern concordance is not Tiberian. It's modern concordance. So there are certain things that they've put their prefaces in, which we do understand, but for the sake of us navigating our way back to what we're utilizing, that's the reason why I'm sticking to that script, because when you go to Strong's number, when someone pronounces in another congregation or assembly, when you're listening to someone speak in a movie, when you're listening to Netanyahu or somebody on the news speak, if you start to train your ears, you start learning vocabulary words, and you're learning certain dialects, you will actually be able to communicate with those in the land of Israel. So that is one of the main reasons why I'm using that. And then I'll expand on the thought as we go forward. And instead of us being different, we're trying to be akkad and be as one as possible. And instead of being all over the place. So in closing, the text says that we should all speak the same thing. When you go to the Brit Kadashah, it tells you when you labor together, you should all speak the same thing. We shouldn't be speaking different doctrine. We shouldn't be bringing confusion. So when you have new people coming in, and this is one of the main reasons why I also did it as well. When you have new people coming in and we're using in one assembly 1,000 different names, that is confusing. When they come from the church, no matter what church they go to, everybody knew God, Lord, and Jesus. It don't mean God, Lord, and Jesus is right, but you can be African Methodist, you can be Holiness, you can be Episcopalian, you can be Seventh-day Adventist, you can be whatever denomination of a Christian that you are. When you go into another place of worship in Christianity and say, I want to visit today, if they said God, you knew what they was talking about. If you said Christ, you knew what he was talking about. You knew these things because there were certain things that were the same. We are striving to be as different as we possibly can. When the Most High says unify, unite. So that's the reason why, because of when someone has to ask me information. If I have to give them reference, I can give them reference, and here's where this comes from. Here's a resource you can use. If I'm telling someone to buy tools, why would I say buy tools if we're not going to use the tools, or we're going to actually go against every rule of the tools that we're using? So that's the reason why, for the sake of unity, for the sake of being one, for the sake of trying to understand a dialect, and again, I'll expound on this more next week. And so, again, in short, there's different pronunciations of the name of the Most High, and there's different pronunciations of the name of Mashiach. And so we're not going to get into that fully today. But when y'all hear me teach, the majority of the time, I use Yah. And my reason for using Yah and Yah only, because in Hallelujah, and in the book of Psalms, it says, sing praise to his name, Yah. Yah is the one thing that they all have in common. Whether one says Yahweh, Yahweh, Yahuwah, Yahweh, 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 you know what I'm saying? You have the Yah in common. So that's the reason why the majority of the time, for the sake of unity, I use Yah, because I've been in this walk for a long time. Once a person hear the way I truly pronounce the name in full, people want to separate. Oh, you say the name different. That's a petty argument. People don't pronounce my name in English correctly or the same way, right? So I just want to share this portion today culturally, that more than just us thinking that we know the language, we have to know some history behind the language. We have to know some history even behind the walk that we're a part of. And so as a shepherd, me being the one that the Most High has over this Knesset, and per our bylaws, that's the reason why you see there's two dialects of the name that we say that we use or we recognize. And I'll be going into that a little bit more of what we recognize here and the reason why, you know what I'm saying? But we won't get there today. But again, the reason that Elohim is with the E instead of an A is because in morphology, or the morph or the change of the language through the years, you know, they come up with using the vowel pointing system. But if you go back to more of ancient times, and I do subscribe more to the A than the E myself. So again, I subscribe to the A over the E myself. But for the sake of when we tell it, like when you tell a person to get a sefer, we come out telling people to get a sefer. Why? Because they got Hebrew terms in it. Then we tell them to get a sefer, they get a sefer. Then we go away from all the terms written in the sefer. And some people are having issues with reading the sefer. Why? Because they don't even know the Hebrew. I'm gonna stop screen share. Because they don't know, they can't make out, they can't keep up reading in the sefer, because when those names start actually being more Hebraic in sound, people are like, who are they talking about? But some of them they can catch because phonetically they still sound similar when you bring it over in transliteration using the vowel point or the biblical Hebrew. So that's one reason why I do it. So and not for the sake of today, but going forward, I hope this has been helpful. So the simple answer is that in phonology, there's what's called a phonetic sound, a phonology, there's morphology, there's all these terms that right now is above a lot of us as far as how it works. So this was just a quick answer with a little information, and I'll stay on this line, but Hebrew class is going to be where we can get more and more of this information. But again, the reason the E over the A, or why that happened, is because there are those who are using the Nakud vowel system that believes that the Aleph is silent. The A class, in which I subscribe to, using the A, because I do believe that Aleph and Ayin were throaty sounds, and they made more of the Ah sound based upon other Shemitic languages. One that I do not subscribe to any longer is that Ayin is the only other Hebrew alphabet that we have that makes a sound, which is I, which is where you hear where people saying Yahweh Shai. I don't knock people that use it. I don't teach Yahweh Shai because I don't believe, and upon my research and upon other linguists and other pronunciation systems, you will see that those who do say Aleph and Ayin does make a sound. They all are saying they're gonna make a glottal stop from your frenal gland or from in your throat that you pronounce with the throat, and it's gonna be more of a ah sound. Ah, one of them gonna be deeper than the other. Ah sound, and sometimes they use them as the same sound, but not Yahweh Shai, you know, the I sound. I don't subscribe to that. Ayin actually means I in Hebrew, but I no longer subscribe to, and I haven't subscribed to that for a very long time, that Ayin makes the I sound. And I'll go into that more next week. So that's the reason why, in simple form, why they have Elohim versus Elohim, or Elah versus Allah, is because they have the Nakud vowel system. And again, that system is not designed to cause us to stumble or trip. The inserts of theology or doctrines is what's doing that. So again, when the Jews is telling you that it says Adonai someplace, it doesn't say Adonai, it still has the name of the Father, and it still has the vowel points. You can still say the name of the Father because it's there. So there are things that we're adding all into one basket that don't even go in the same basket together. So it is not my belief that the Tiberian Masoretes came up with the Nakul vowel system, as I once said, but behind those whom I was regurgitating the teachers behind when they came over, wanting us to strictly say Lashawan Kodash. I don't subscribe that the Tiberian Masoretes were trying to trick us, because if they were trying to trick us, they would have took Yod Hey Wah out of the text, and they would have inserted Adonai as the Jewish community is telling us to do. So with that, I know that was a lot of information in a short period of time. Hope that it's helped some, but I continue to build a thought going forward. And again, in closing, it tells you that that the Most High has given us stammering lips, and he's taught his people in stammering lips and another tongue. So Hebrew is not going to be our main focus, as our dialect is 100% correct. It is the Most High has woke us up speaking English. We're studying the language, and we're trying to return. And it's something we're doing together as a Mishpachah. And at some point, I will invite some Hebrew speakers, and when they have time, and some of which I've mentioned, I'll invite them on at some point and let you hear them actually have a conversation with me or with each other, and let you hear them speak dialect, because they're more in tune. I take my hat off to Rosh Shema, because the Ak has his household. They are laboring to speak the same way Abadal and his Mishpachah speak both English and Spanish. Rosh in his household is trying to make it that at some point his household is speaking totally Hebrew. Wife, children, everybody, like the whole house, and that's his goal. So his passion for the language is to get his whole house speaking the whole dialect and be like one of the first of those who are waking up to the truth and been in the walk, that now has households that now their generation and generations just grow up speaking Hebrew as well as English. So with that, I hope that this has been edifying. And like I said, we go into it more next week. So whether we use Elohim or Elohim, there's no harm and no foul. We recognize both at this Knesset, but that was the response as to why. But it was not anything negative in reference or regards to it. It did not change the meaning. It did not change the numerical value. So everything is still Tov Miyod with that, or Tawab Mawada, So y'all see how the difference is. We cannot even communicate. If I was to say certain things in what's commonly called Lashwan Kodash, like Thawada, we say Toda. Things start getting further and further away in phonetic sound when you start going that way. So for us to try to be one, and so when people have study aids and study guides that we're telling them to get, study books and grammar books, what's going to be written therein is going to be the biblical. And with that, I give all praise, honor, esteem to the Most High. Before I close, is there any question before I close? I'll take a short question. Zaken Yaakov, if you have any comment, Not today. We can go into that today. Zaken Yaakov, of course, you have any statements? I'm going to open the floor to you first, and then Shah Shamar, I'll come at you for your question.
King Toda Moreh, Shabbat Shalom Mishpachah. I just want to make a couple points, Moreh, to support what you just said. The first is when we're getting back to the language too, it's important to realize that you have two kind of, well, I'll put it this way: you have a written language and you have a spoken language. You have a written language and a spoken language, and spoken language is first. Even today, as you're growing up, you learn how to say words before you actually learn how to read those words. When you're growing up and you start speaking with your parents, and oh, his first words is mama, or his first words is dada, right? You start to speak the language before you read the language. And that's when the dialect really starts to become important, is when you start to read the language. And the only reason why I'm saying that is that, dialect, we read that dialect is important to the region, to the group, to the community and stuff like that, right? So what I think, my intentions are, and I think Moreh Samak is the same, is that at True Light by Athia, we're teaching that biblical Hebrew so that we all can function in the same language. And you heard him mention that a codness, to be in that one, is where we need to be. So at True Light by Yah, dialect is, and I'll use that term dialect loosely, but dialect is as important if we're going to be functional in the spoken language and the written language, you know. And I just want to kind of touch one thing on that Lashwan Kadash. You know, that word literally translates to separated or set apart tongue. And what it means is a set apart language, right? And I'll put it this way. I started off learning that Lashwan Kodash, you know, but when you look into it, it's just a dialect of Hebrew that a group or community is functioning in, right? And you know, like he said, the majority of the Jewish people say that they're Lashuan Kodash too, or Lashon Kodesh, right? But if we look at that word set apart, tongue, if just quote unquote the Black Hebrews are using Lashuan Kodash, I mean, literally that's what set apart is. If they're the only ones using it, you know what I mean? Then it's set apart from everybody else. And so really that's what I think. Well, when me and Moreh Samak are talking about getting back to the language, we're teaching that modern language so we all can be functional in a dialect. This true light community, and eventually, you know, as we grow, that dialect is how we become functional together as a community, as a group, as a region in a language. Is everybody adapts to a dialect. Doesn't mean that everybody else that doesn't use that dialect is wrong. It's just that that group is functional in that language, that everybody is speaking the same language. And really, that's what the Masoretes really try to do, is so we're all saying it the same way, so nobody say, ah, ah, ah. And just for an example, if I just said that book was read, speaking the spoken language, you would have to know the context to know what I'm talking about. But if I wrote it down, that book was read, just because the way the vowels are put in there and the spelling of that word read, you would know if I'm talking about the book was color read or the book was read. Like I read the newspaper. I read the newspaper that day. But if I just said the book was read, you'd have to know the context in the spoken language that I'm talking about, either color or that it was read. I read that book already. You know what I mean? So that's the difference between the spoken language and the written language, and where dialect starts to become critical to be functional. Told me, Moreh Samak, told me, lesson.
Hallelujah. Zakan, you have a way with words. You always have a vivid picture. That was a great closing, Zakan. Told us so much for your words, Zakan. Shashamar, the floor is yours.
Ken Toda, y'all just had one quick question. The Ak says, if I'm saying his name correctly, Rosh Shamash, I was just curious of what dialect that he used for him, you know, his household.
I already stated he uses the biblical. He's using biblical also, but even with his dialect, there's going to be some slight differences in maybe what we learn, but you'll still be able to communicate. So his dialect is going to be pretty much what we're teaching. He teaches biblical Hebrew, or he uses that functional system. Now, whether it's going to be the biblical Yemenite or the biblical Tiberian, so there's things that he may use, such as Zaken Yaquah was teaching, but we got to the point where, for the sake of making it easy for people first starting off, like, for example, the Qomatz and the Patak. The Qomatz and the Patak, in some biblical grammar books, it would tell you that Qomatz and Patak both make the same sound, which is going to be the I sound, like as in father. But then there's going to be other grammar books that you would get, Hebrew grammar books, that would tell you that the Qomatz is a long A-class vowel and the Patak is a short A-class vowel. Therefore, they make slightly different sounds. One of them is a longer A sound, one of them is a shorter A sound. So Rosh, he actually goes from that. He actually recognizes the Patak as a short class. And if I'm in error in any way, whenever we invite him on, when he has time, he can share those things. But he recognizes all the letters as we recognize all the letters. But he also recognizes grammar rules more thoroughly. You know what I'm saying? He's more thorough with the grammar rules and actually stating. And again, like even from my perspective, Zaken Yaquah's perspective, Rose's perspective, Moreh Lamash's perspective, why do we say what we say? So the thing would be like, why would we have a Kwamet's long class vowel and then put top long class vowel? So, I mean, and you saying it's short, but it make the exact same sound, or would it actually be, because in English, a long A is a long A and a short A is a short A, and you can someone tell the difference. So you will still be able to understand exactly, basically what Zaken Yaakov said, the dialect that Roche uses, you'll be able to communicate with him because it's so similar or familiar to what we're already doing. And even we who are trying to use the same system will still pronounce some things slightly different, but you'll be able to identify what we're saying slightly different. So for example, if I say Ruach and Ruach, what's the difference? Ruach, Ruach. Josh, I'm asking you. Ruach.
And one is has a lighter sound at the end. The first one is more of a throat. I believe the second one is more of like a lighter sound.
But would you still be able to identify them as the same word?
King.
What if I say Rakha? Rakha. Rakha. Ruach, Ruach.
That one's a little bit more different, but I believe I could probably still pick it up.
That's because I said it together. But if I was to say it without saying it together, and you thinking, so do you get what I'm saying? So one dialect would be saying Rakha, and Rakha does not even sound like Ruach or Ruach. So the long A, short A, so those would be the differences that you would hear in what dialect he may use, and it still would be the same system that we're actually currently using. But like I said, there may be certain rules that are more used, like in modern, they say that IN don't make a sound, so some people don't want to say, he may actually put the sound in. You know what I'm saying? He's going to try to phonetically make all the sounds that the language can make, but you would identify it. Versus if we were to say a lot of things in Lashawan Kodash versus the biblical, it can get lost in translation real quick. There are certain words that would sound somewhat similar, but then it get lost in translation real quick. Because with Ruach versus Rakha, there's something called a furtive patak. And the furtive patak is telling you that at the end of a word, that patak is going to be pronounced before the consonant that is under. Whereas in Lashawan Kodash, they're still pronouncing the consonant first and then the vowel afterwards. So that rule changes the sound totally or almost totally of a word. The reason why I know what it is because, like I said, I come from both systems. So being all things to all people, if I go amongst a congregation that uses Lashawan Kodash, then and if y'all see me online teaching somewhere, and y'all like, boy, Samak show sound different. He up there, by Hashem, Yahweh, Allah, you know, that's because where I'm at that day. So when Paul's saying all things to all people, why would I go use a dialect that I know they don't use, a language system? I would use the system that's already genuinely in me. So Lashawan Kodash was more in me because I was doing it at this point, not necessarily longer, but I learned it first in my youthful state of an Israelite. So as a child grows up, like Zaken said, he starts speaking things first. I was doing that first, so it came easy to me. You know what I'm saying? But with the biblical, you got to learn the rules. You have to remember the rules, and you have to think about what's going on when you hear the translation. So I can interchange them based upon Knesset, and that would be pretty much at this time the only reason why you hear me do it is if I'm speaking at an assembly. If I'm invited to speak at an assembly, and they use those terms that way, I try to listen attentively, hear what someone is using. When I hear what they use, and when I'm there, I use terms that they use. So, but outside of that, like Zaken was saying, for us to be a functional community here, we're trying to get to using a certain dialect. And I will tell y'all that, you know, and the reason why I also said we're going to start doing Shabbat discussions more than teaching lessons, and sometimes we're going to have to do real talk Hebrew real talk. Hebrew real talk is basically being truthful what we're feeling also. A lot of this different dialect and different things that we're saying, it turns some people off and it shuts them down. They don't even want to come sometimes, but they don't even want to be a part of it. They're like, y'all change it too much. It's all over the place. I don't even get it. Like, it's confusing. And so, and it troubles people. And then when people start hearing like, when we start doing this and when we start doing that, we got Hebrew class together, we doing this, where all this stuff coming from? And now that's bringing stuff from the outside, inside, and those things can be irritating to people's ruach. And so, yes, in prayer, in private time, you know, of course we do what we do. But when you come together in a community, if this is how it's done, that's just what we're trying to do for the sake of a cause of oneness, and also understand that those that are strong must bear the infirmities of those who are weak. So we understand that. Well, a lot of people don't even understand that when we do such things, we're causing some people's ruach to be troubled. And so we try not to, as a shepherd, myself and Zaken Yaakov, we're trying to keep the troubling ruach from happening by being as a cod as we possibly can. And people got to say, when we switch to this, when y'all start doing this, why they doing this, why they doing that? We're trying to be as one as possible. Now, when people come in to visit, you will hear differences or things that we just totally don't do. We don't knock and we don't frown, but don't say, well, everybody doing something different. But what do we do? What are we learning? What are we studying? What are we feeding on? What is the Most High leading, directing, and guiding us? Because we're still going to cover other dialects as well. But right now, what we're going into is for that reason that I've stated. So with that, that was a good question, Shashamar, and that's what this platform is for. So did that answer the question, Adon?
And it did. Hallelujah. Total Rabah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. All right. We went a little over. We went way over. We went way over. But I'm going to yield the floor to Adon Kanakia at this time. Shabbat Shalom, Mishpachah. Adon Kanakia, it's your floor.